The Sony A7V has finally arrived after a 4-year wait since the release of the A7 IV. Now, the A7 III and A7 IV were the best-selling mirrorless cameras for years, but there's now much stiffer competition. The Nikon Z6 III and ZR, the Canon R6 III, heck, the new Lumix cameras, the Sony A7V is no longer a no-brainer like it once was. So, was it worth the wait? Let's find out.
Incoming parcel detected, sir. Origin, the Sony Corporation.
Sony Corp, huh? All right, Echo. What are we working with?
Preliminary scans indicate a prototype alpha model, the Alpha 7V. The long-awaited update everyone on the internet swore would never come.
The A7 line. I mean, the previous versions are kind of what put Sony on the map back in the early mirrorless days. So let me guess. Same old sensor, pop that same new AI autofocus chip in there, call that innovation?
A reasonable assumption, based on historical patterns and comment sections. However, my analysis suggests this one's nearly rebuilt from the ground up. New internals, new design, new brain. I'm almost impressed.
You're telling me they finally gave the entry-level model the flippy tilty screen treatment?
Oh, much more than that, sir. Refined hardware, upgraded I/O, a redesigned body, new sensor architecture, a complete systems overhaul. It's as if Sony remembered what new actually means.
All right then, what's under the hood?
A 33 megapixel, partially stacked, backside illuminated CMOS sensor paired with the new Bionz XR2 processor. A processor integrated with the AI unit.
Okay, but like, how fast are we talking here?
The A7V is capable of raw bursts at 30 frames per second, blackout free, plus customizable speed boost and, wait for it, pre-capture up to 1 second before you even press the shutter.
Okay, wow, yeah, they really did pull out all the stops. So that means they finally added OpenGate, right? Right? So with this A7V, is Sony still the top dog? Should you still be choosing this over the others? Should you upgrade? Let's get into why and why not. All right, so let's first talk about speed. Most of this centers around the new 33 megapixel partially stacked sensor. This new partially stacked sensor technology has quickly become the standard for cameras like those I've just mentioned, the ones that aren't the professional level price point. And that's because it gives us a lot of the benefits of a fully stacked sensor without the cost. I won't pretend to understand the specifics of how this works, but it gives us a lot more on the speed side of things.
If I may. A partially stacked sensor places a fast layer of DRAM circuitry only under parts of the sensor, not the entire imaging area. This speeds up readout compared to a traditional backside illuminated sensor that was present in the previous A7 IV. This is why you get things like 30 frames per second, blackout free, and full autofocus and a subject tracking in photo mode, along with improved rolling shutter performance in video. However, it is still not as fast as we see in fully stacked sensors like the Alpha 1.
Right, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. But of course, there are drawbacks to this. Typically we see worse dynamic range or things like crops or line skipping in higher frame rates for video, but we'll get to that in more detail in a little bit. In addition to getting 30 frames per second raw photos, you're also getting pre-capture, which can be super customizable depending on whatever settings you want up to 1 second prior to actually pressing the shutter. So sports or wildlife or facts action, this suddenly becomes a very compelling option when you'd normally need a flagship camera to achieve most of those features. But like I mentioned, a lot of cameras are starting to push the limits with high speeds, as well as their own partially stacked sensors. Most of them are buying their sensors from Sony's sensor division anyways, but this 33 megapixel sensor is so far only for Sony, and it's the highest resolution partially stacked sensor we've seen so far, so that is definitely a differentiator. Another new component to the speed equation is the new processor. So up to this point, the latest Sony cameras have had their Bionz XR processor, and then they have a separate dedicated AI chip that drives the autofocus. Well, we now have the new Bionz XR2 chip, which combines both of those things into one. So technically, this is now a better processor than we have on even the Alpha 1 II or the A9 III. Now, I've been saying for years now that Sony's autofocus is far and away the best of any camera, and they're claiming this is even better. It's got all the crazy subject detection with peoples and planes and trains and birds and insects and stuff, all the good stuff, right? I was super impressed with its ability to stick to a subject and an eye.
I will say the autofocus on this camera is pretty gnarly.
The autofocus is great. It's really nice having good autofocus, you know?
Like it's tracking your eye through the brim of your hat.
Yeah. I can like turn around and then it goes to my head, and then I turn around again and it goes to my eye. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
It's like really, really good.
While you were off gallivanting around the desert without me, I was running some tests on this new processor. It appears to lead to some impressive efficiency gains. I have measured a 23% improvement on battery life compared to the predecessor. The battery is rated for 630 shots with the EBF and a whopping 750 with the LCD screen.
Now, while I always feel like these battery ratings are a little bit suspect, like how are they sitting there counting these, whatever, I definitely felt to me like the battery life was improved. Despite heavy usage in some pretty cold temperatures that usually affects battery life, I never really noticed the battery dipping. So if we compare it to the 420 shot rating of the A1 II and a 520 shot rating of the previous A7 IV, it is obviously improved battery life, which we love. I actually think the efficiency side of things is an area where the A7 V has a leg up on the competition. Let's maybe stop bearing the lead. There are a few glaring things that this camera is missing. But first, you've likely noticed that we've been bumping up the graphics here on the channel lately. Well, this has all been made possible due in part to Motion VFX. Motion VFX is a huge suite of plugins for DaVinci Resolve, Final Cut, Premiere Pro, After Effects that really helps to take the pain out of creating your own motion graphics. They have a ton of packs to choose from, so whether you need help making how-to videos or tutorials or even a documentary, there are a ton of different packs to choose from to suit your individual projects. Each pack comes with a bunch of individual effects that can easily be customized with your own color and branding and fonts and style. So those who have been around the channel a while have obviously noticed a change to the channel's branding. Good news is this is actually really easy to do within DaVinci Resolve just in the inspector window. Like you don't have to dive into Fusion if you don't want to. They're also having a big final price cut sale right now. So you can get 30% off site-wide using the code FINAL. And this week is the last week that they're doing 50% off 5 different packs. So treat yourself into the holiday season, head to the link in the description and check out Motion VFX. And as always, a huge thank you to Motion VFX for sponsoring today's video. Okay, so the most glaring things this camera is missing. The first is OpenGate. On the one hand, it's kind of crazy to me that this has become such a boiling point in the comments when it's something a lot of others don't even know exists. But a few cameras are starting to have it, and they've done a great job of convincing us that we absolutely need it. So here we are. Now, what is OpenGate? OpenGate is when the camera can record the full height and width of the sensor rather than being limited to just 16:9 recording. This is the aspect ratio that you get in photos, for example. The idea of OpenGate is why can't we also have that for video? Now, the Sony A7V still doesn't have this. And honestly, I'm not entirely sure when we should be expecting this from Sony, or if we should be expecting it from Sony anytime soon. My understanding is that this is more a limitation of the XAVC codec that Sony uses. And it might not even be a technical limitation so much as a legal or like a registration of what XAVC is limitation. Ek, are you clear on this one? Do you know?
Negative, sir. I've done some snooping, but Sony Corp's security system is proving to be better than expected.
Cool. Thanks for nothing. Great. We're also not getting any form of raw internal video or higher resolution video. Obviously, with Nikon's purchase of Red, we're starting to see 12-bit RAW video being included in most of their cameras. We even have Red RAW that has made its way into the Nikon ZR, and Canon has introduced things like 12-bit Canon RAW Lite into some of their cameras. Nikon, Red, and Lumix now offer some combination of RAW, OpenGate, 5, 6, or even 7K recording in some variation. With the Sony A7V, we have downsampled 7K to 4K at up to 60 frames per second with no crop. And then 4K 120 is available, but only in Super 35 mode. Now, on paper, it's easy to look at those things and say that the Sony sucks at video. Like all the other cameras got a whole lot of Ks. Sony's only got 4 of them. They're downsampled Ks, which is good, but still only 4Ks. But from a practical standpoint, the Sony is a lot more real-world useful for most folks. The issue I think a lot of people miss with things like the Nikon ZR is just how large those files get. Like, I hate to break it to you, but for many people, the money you're going to be spending on CF Express cards and RAID storage would be better spent on some lighting and a color grading course. Or you could purchase my Power Grade and LUTs from shopverygood.com. We just dropped our VG400 that emulates the Portra 400 film stock. Link is in the description. Use the promo code Meshna for 35% off that and everything else in the store. It just dropped. It's sick. I just think you should also consider the additional costs and workflow issues that come with those higher end specs. Yes, I own a Nikon ZR. I own a Pixis 12K, so I understand the hypocrisy here. But sometimes I still much prefer the simpler workflow of my FX3. And at this point, if you can't make 10-bit color work, I don't think buying a 12-bit camera is going to magically fix all of your problems.
Oh, I can't wait to read the comments after that little rant.
But I will say, it's nice to see that they've improved a lot of the things that I think matter more. The partially stacked sensor and therefore improved readout does drastically improve the rolling shutter, which was a big complaint of the A7 IV and the A7R5. It just does 4K video really well, and downsampling without line skipping, without pixel binning and all that stuff, it makes the 4K look really good. Okay, so what about low light performance? Dual base ISO, that kind of thing. So most cameras advertise dual base ISO. Echo, do you have an actual reading on what the dual base ISO is?
My scans are negative, sir. Perhaps you could run your own test, since you're doing a camera review and all.
Great, thanks.
They didn't tell us what the dual base ISO is, so we're gonna find out right now because it's very dark. I don't know, 2500, 3200, 4000, it could be 4000. That would make some sense. 6400 is what I would guess would happen, but I don't know. I'm just gonna keep going. We're at 8,000 now. It's probably not 8,000.
What is it?
Definitely not 10,000. 12,800 is definitely not that. So we've gone through them all and we'll figure it out later.
So that new 8,000 second base ISO is actually pretty solid, but I do think the FX3 still wins in low light, which is fair.
After an analysis of viewer sentiment, it appears many people have issues with Sony's built-in noise reduction.
All right, so there's actually a new feature called Angle View Priority. When it's on, this disables the in-camera noise reduction for those requesting it. Why is it called Angle of View Priority? That's beyond me, but whatever. When you have that enabled, there's a very slight crop in 4K 60 and a slight additional crop to the 4K 120, but there's no impact to anything else. So dynamic range stays the same, still that same 7K oversampling, no line skipping, all that stuff. Now, somehow we've gotten this far without mentioning any of the hardware. The body design is the same as the A7R5, so that deeper grip than the A7 IV, but not my personal favorite on the A1 II and the A9 III.
We got some updated I/O on this bad boy. So you have our mic port, which can be, that's like its own little spot. So I really like that you can have everything else closed and just have the mic port open. Then we have our headphone jack, and then in here behind door number 3, look at this. 2 USB ports. One of these is for just power delivery. The other one is a USB-C 3.2 Gen 2. So that's up to 10 gigabytes per second of data transfer. Pretty sweet that we have 2 ports because I think on the last one we still had a USB micro, which I don't understand why I would do that. I think maybe there were some things that utilized the micro USB for time code. I'm not a big time code guy. Maybe go watch Matt Johnson's video about that. He'll probably have something about the time code, but all new I/O, which is pretty nice. And full-size HDMI. Gotta have full-size HDMI. If you don't have full-size HDMI, Nikon, what are you doing? What else is new about this thing? I mean, come on, look at this. Can it flip? Yes. Can it tilt? Yes. Can it swivel, flip, and tilt? Yes, it can do all of the things. You can put this in any configuration you could possibly think of. What's not to love? The only thing not to love is I wish it was bigger, because the Nikon ZR, once you go Nikon ZR, you can't go back, because it's a big screen. It's like, the guy that everybody got sent during COVID? Nikon's like that guy. Tech specs wise, this is the same exact screen that we have on the Alpha 1 Mark II, which is more than twice the price of this camera. What else do we got? We got 2 card slots. One of them is a CF Express A and an SD. The other one, unfortunately, is just an SD card. So, you got dual recording, but you can't do the highest end dual recording. Truthfully, I don't think you really need CF Express A. I think the only thing that you need CF Express A for is if you're doing XAVCSI all intra. I mean, it's like minusculely better and like twice the size. I don't think you need to be doing that. And if you need to do it, you can do it still. You just need to do it in one. You're gonna be fine. Another very nice thing, this seems minor, but I tell you, it is major. So this on A7 IV was just exposure compensation. However, this one we can program to be anything, and it rotates freely. So I have this now programmed to just be a free-flowing Kelvin. So my Kelvin right now is set to 5300. If I just swivel this, brings the Kelvin up, brings the Kelvin down. So in video mode, I use this all the time because I want to keep it locked, but I want to still be able to have some control of my white balance. And then on the top here, we just, if we don't want to like bump this accidentally while recording, click it in, now it's locked in place.
The EVF is still the 3.69 million dots. So basically what we had on the A7 IV, now still nowhere close to what we have on the A1 II. So for all of us who spent more than double on the A1 II, we can rest our hats on the fact that, hey, 30 frames per second, it's been taken, but we still have the better EVF. Inside that EVF, however, it was a nice little surprise. Didn't realize it until like halfway through shooting. That's that there is a little mini level and a clock at the little bottom black bar in the viewfinder. Small, but it's a little thing. Like you're seeing your level without having to have that like kind of take over the whole screen in your composition. It's quite nice. And a clock, I mean like, hey, I like my watch, but that's pretty neat.
Wow, really hard-hitting analysis from you, sir. I'm sure Gerald's viewers won't get that level of in-depth coverage.
Great, thank you. Again. All right, so this is the point where I should point out all the flaws and try to, point out why you shouldn't buy it. I typically pride myself in my ability to throw some cold water on the flames. There's no open gate. It's probably going to be the thing that people complain about most. There's no anamorphic support. And as someone who shoots a lot of anamorphic, I obviously wish it was there. Sony certainly isn't pushing the envelope when it comes to higher resolution and internal RAW. They're instead preferencing making just really good 4K, which is honestly probably all most people need anyways. One thing I do really wish they included, however, is 32-bit float recording internally. They added an additional mic that's supposed to help with like noise cancellation and reduction or something like that. And like that's cool and all, but the 32-bit float internally that they have on the Nikon ZR has already saved me more times than I should reasonably admit, because I should probably be setting my levels better, but sometimes you're running gun. And in that instance, it is really, really helpful. Like I honestly didn't mean to compare this to the ZR as much, but I do think if it's just purely on the video front, I do think it wins. If you really, really need open gate, the S1 II is probably your best bet, but the autofocus is not super great. If you're a Canon fanboy, the R6 III, that one's great, but you're gonna have to stick with all Canon glass because for whatever reason, they don't want other people making lenses, which is silly to me. But if you want one of the most well-rounded hybrid photo and video cameras, I think it's hard to argue that it isn't this for the price point. On the whole, I think the A7 V is a very solid improvement, and I think the $2,900 price point, I think the value's there. It's less than half the price of the A1 II, and it's way more than half the camera. But I'd love to know your thoughts. Let me know in the comments, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.